Japan 2023. People board a train and head to work. Everyone is busy with their own things, scrolling through Instagram feeds, making acquaintances on social networks, and discussing plans for the evening, unaware that in just a few minutes, their lives will change forever. Suddenly, the train's speed increases, and strange things start happening. A bottle cap rolling on the floor of the carriage suddenly disappears. Passengers begin receiving alerts about powerful earthquakes on their phones. Then the train enters a gloomy tunnel and comes to a sudden halt. People regain consciousness, bewildered by what has happened. One of the passengers opens the entrance doors, and people, screaming and pushing each other, rush to the exit, jumping from the high steps. But once outside, they can't believe their eyes. Traces of the civilized world are gone, and they are surrounded by the remnants of a destroyed city, overgrown with trees and grass. Moreover, all the carriages have disappeared without a trace, except for the fifth one they were in. As time passes, the passengers begin to get acquainted. One of the guys, Shirahama, a firefighter, examines the injured and suggests checking the tunnel behind the carriage. He is joined by a girl named Katana and a guy named Hayashima, who also wants to understand what happened. Meanwhile, the police in the city cannot figure out where the last two carriages have gone, while the rest of the train, along with the passengers, remains undamaged. The three volunteers enter the tunnel and walk through the dark underworld for a long time. Suddenly, they notice a light ahead and hurry towards it, but when they emerge outside, they are astonished. There is nothing around that would remind them of the year 2023 with skyscrapers and technology, just a vast, lifeless desert. Shocked, the trio returns to their fellow misfortune mates. Initially, people do not believe their report, but after Hayashima shows a video recording of the surroundings, they are forced to accept the new reality. After 7 hours, people languish in anticipation of rescuers, when one of the girls, Reni, secretly looks into Hayashima's bag and finds a letter marked with the criminal department's seals, leading her to suspect that the guy's a criminal. Then Reni snatches food from Katana's bag, but, thinking she was seen, discards the package. Hayashima picks it up and carries it to the train, just as Katana discovers the theft. Seeing it in the guy's hands, the passengers accuse him of theft. Moreover, Reni reports about the letter from the colony. Offended, Hayashima denies the accusations and announces his departure. At this time, Shirahama pulls out a box of fruits and offers to share them. While Katana is distributing the food, one of the guys reviews the video he made earlier, clearly showing Reni stealing the food. Realizing that Hayashima is innocent, Shirahama and Katana run after him, managing to save the guy who nearly falls into a deep ditch. In gratitude, he confesses that he works as a hairdresser and is already 30 years old. But he refuses to explain the origin of the letter from the colony. Night falls. Passengers somehow settle down to sleep, but many cannot sleep, worrying about their future. In the morning, people begin to realize that they may never return home. Shirahama tries to gather the scattering people, but a friend asks the guide not to take responsibility for others' lives. Then the firefighter confesses that because of him, his colleague was injured, losing the ability to walk. Now he believes he must help everyone he can. Together, they catch up with those who left and persuade them to return to the carriage to solve problems collectively. Seeing this, Hayashima remembers his brother who was in prison, and the letter in his bag was from him. Fate had it that he had to take on the upbringing of his younger brother, and he still feels guilty for his older brother becoming a criminal. Meanwhile, a couple of passengers explore the surrounding area and find the ruins of a high tower. This is particularly strange because the news reported its construction, which was supposed to be completed in 2026. And one of the passengers found a can in the forest dated that year. A biologist among them encountered a plant whose genetic modification takes 30 years. It turns out that they are in the distant future of Earth, and it's far from a joyful discovery. At the same time, in 2023, all channels are broadcasting messages about the disappearance of two carriages, which had at least 100 passengers. Night approaches, and many fall into despair, while Katana and Shirahama place plastic containers on the roof of the carriage, hoping for rain. In the morning, the biologist draws the others' attention to the dense greenery, which means there must be a body of water nearby. A group of youth sets out to explore the forest. Along the way, Hayashima confesses that his parents are criminals, and then the guy spots a frog. This means water is very close, but ahead are impassable cliffs, which can only be climbed with the help of ropes. The group returns to the train and cutting wires heads back to the cliffs. Shirahama climbs to the top and joyfully shouts upon seeing a waterfall, but looking around he is horrified. Instead of Mount Fuji, a sea stretches out before him. Returning, he tells the others about this, and people start to speculate what happened to their planet. At night, everyone goes to sleep, but the eldest passenger, Tanaka, goes outside and sees an unfamiliar person. But when he tells about it, no one believes him. Then it starts to rain, helping people to collect water and even bathe. Meanwhile, the biologist continues to study the surrounding fauna, finds several edible plants, and shows them to the others. And still, Katana manages to eat a poisonous berry, but fortunately, her poisoning is not fatal. The news that the girl has recovered has a sobering effect on the passengers. They finally realize that sitting still, they won't survive. People get to work and even make utensils from bamboo. Bank cards turn out to be decent knives. The group of youths brings water from the waterfall, and they prepare a soup from plants. But after dinner, some feel sick and the biologist discovers a couple of poisonous berries in the common pot. Someone remembers seeing Tanaka near the pot, who is not among them. Shirahama sets out to look for him, but stumbles, falls, and loses his torch. After a while, Shirahama returns without Tanaka, but with Hayashima's previously lost barber tools, which he had sorely missed. In the morning, the biologist announces to the people that he is going to look for a river, which should be nearby. His friends go with him. But in the forest, they encounter a stranger who injures the biologist and runs away. The guys carry him back to the train, where fortunately there is a medical student who provides the injured with first aid. The others help as much as they can and pray for the guy. Later, Tanaka unexpectedly returns from the forest. It turns out he worked for a security company and can show how to make traps around the camp. Reni asks Hayashima to fix her hair, and soon there's a queue for the guy. Meanwhile, Shirahama and Katana notice a teenager caught in one of the traps, but the youngster gets out on his own and runs away. The friends hurry after him and soon find themselves by the river, but the boy asks them to wait for him at the spot and disappears into the forest. Hayashima, noticing their disappearance, catches up with the pair. At this time, the teenager returns and leads the friends to carriage number 6, which mysteriously ended up several kilometers away from the 5th carriage. The passengers from the 5th carriage are welcomed by the leader of the group from the 6th carriage, Yumamoto. Their carriage was lucky to be near the river, where there was plenty of fresh water and fish. Moreover, among them was a builder who, under his guidance, they were able to quickly set up a camp and even build a kitchen and a toilet. The newcomers find the one who injured their biologist. He confesses that he did it out of fear, thinking they were going to attack him. He bows deeply, apologizing for his action. And Yumamoto admits that he believes a return to the past is possible. The man told them that in the early days, they found a small boat on the river, where he managed to fix the radio and catch a signal, apparently from Canada, where the year 2060 was mentioned. From what he heard, the man understood that in 2026 a disaster occurred. A huge asteroid fell to Earth, causing powerful earthquakes and tsunamis worldwide, instantly taking billions of lives. The dust thrown into the atmosphere blocks sunlight, leading to the extinction of the remaining species. But the main thing is that the asteroid didn't fall by chance. It was space debris, as besides state corporations, satellites began to be launched by anyone who fancied. One of the probes collided with a satellite, which in turn fell onto an asteroid, leading to a deviation of its orbit. So it was a man-made disaster. That's why it's so important to return to their year and change the future. Inspired by the example of the 6th carriage, the passengers decided to make a bath by the river. Meanwhile, Tanaka continues to deteriorate, making himself a doll from branches and talking to it. In the morning, the bath is ready. For the first time in many days, people bathe in hot water and wash their clothes. And the guys find a strange stone on the riverbank, which Yumamoto learns about. He sends his people to find it, but Reni notices strangers, and one of the guys lets slip that according to their leader, this stone might help them return home. The girls argue about the need to return, and Reni pushes Katana away. She falls and accidentally shifts a layer of soil, under which a dead body is discovered. Meanwhile, Tanaka reads in a newspaper an announcement about the search for a murderer in his description. At that time, Reni and Katana are attacked by guys from the 6th carriage, but Reni breaks free and runs to her own, where she tells about the found corpse, while Katana escapes from the guys through the forest. The fifth carriage decides to make weapons, while Shirahama and Hayashima run to the neighbors. But the girl is not there, and Katana meanwhile makes it to the boat. Yumamoto is forced to confess to the guys that he killed one of the passengers, who suddenly became aggressive and started attacking people with a knife. That's why he was recognized as a leader. The guys go home, hoping that Katana has returned, but she's not there, and the rest urge to go to the sixth carriage and punish the guilty. And the guys go again to look for the girl. Katana hides in the boat when Yumamoto comes in. He pretends to be calling an unknown station, but the girl sees that the wires are cut. The man discovers her and confesses that he doesn't want to return to the past because he intends to create a new society here. After that, he ties up Katana and locks her in the cabin, where her screams cannot be heard. In the morning, the passengers of the fifth carriage are just about to attack the neighbors when one of the women suggests backing up and looking for a building where they could hide. At this time, guys from the sixth carriage go to the neighbors to scavenge something, but they fall into traps. A fight starts when the rest of the sixth carriage's passengers arrive, and there are more men among them. The fight escalates into a real battle, which is stopped by the appearance of the escaped Katana, who accuses Yumamoto of lying. He is forced to admit to the deception, but he just wanted to keep people's spirits up. However, the passengers decide to exile the former leader. Before leaving, the man hands over a journal from the ship, which contains information about the tower that could help them return to the past. Meanwhile, those who went to search for the building reach the tower and find glowing asteroid fragments there. And in 2023, scientist Ray, after reviewing the video surveillance camera recordings, discovers that a wormhole appeared in the tunnel at the moment of the disappearance of two carriages, which apparently was the result of a distortion in the space-time continuum. The passengers study the journal found by Yumamoto and learn the exact date of the disaster. Moreover, they have an asteroid fragment that possesses a phenomenal magnetic charge. One of the passengers remembers how on the day of their departure, he saw something in the sky resembling a falling star. In the past, Ray, analyzing the same event, concludes that it was the flare from a supernova explosion. In the future, there's also an expert who explains that supernovas occur in space when a star reaches the end of its life cycle and explodes, releasing a massive amount of energy. Apparently, this created the temporal rift into which both carriages fell. It means they need to open this wormhole again. In the evening, a strong storm begins, forcing people to seek more reliable shelter than the carriage. Tanaka opens the rear doors leading into the tunnel. Unexpectedly, a strong gust snatches his doll and sucks it into the wormhole caused by the hurricane. But as soon as the storm subsides, the wormhole disappears. And in 2023, scientists find Tanaka's doll. Passengers in the future conclude that to summon the wormhole, they need a powerful energy source, for which they start looking for remnants of power lines. Digging up each post, the passengers find an electrical substation where, somehow, working equipment is preserved. They redirect enough electricity into the tunnel to stabilize the wormhole with the onset of the next storm, enough to return to the past. The storm starts at night, supported by the power of the substation. The wormhole opens, and everyone enters the carriage except Tanaka, who refused to return. The carriage is swallowed by the hole and races somewhere in space and time until its doors are opened by security service employees who say they have arrived on May 1, 2026, which means there are only a few months left before the asteroid falls. After going through quarantine procedures, the passengers tell the officials, presenting as evidence fragments of the meteorite and unusual plants from the future. Only the officials don't believe the stories about the upcoming apocalypse. Later, the internet buzzes about the incident. The time travelers find fans, which helps maintain interest in the traveler's story about the upcoming end of the world. Meanwhile, scientist Ray becomes convinced that the travelers are telling the truth, as he has also tracked the asteroid. One of the passengers posts an appeal on the internet telling ordinary people about the impending danger, and a passenger who held a high position in the government before the trip makes her way to the Minister of Defense. She listens to her former colleague and reports that the government believed them and is already preparing to launch a missile capable of altering the asteroid's trajectory to pass by Earth. Time passes, and the day of the catastrophe is about to dawn. The travelers decide to gather together on the platform to find out whether it was possible to avert the disaster, and if not, to perish together. But the military successfully completes their task and changes the meteorite's trajectory, saving humanity from total extinction. Quite an unusual series where various theories about the impending doom of humanity are mixed. And the finale of the story is very relevant, emphasizing that life on Earth is the result of the actions of each living being. And the future of the planet is a collective human responsibility. Czech astrophysicist Jakub wakes up in his ship thousands of miles from Earth. His day starts with a call from the flight curator and close friend Peter. Today, the people of Earth want to communicate with the hero. The head of the Czech space program, Tuma, greets the brave pilot as he has been on a solo flight for 189 days already. The thing is, for 4 years, a mysterious cosmic phenomenon, which has been named Chopra's Cloud, has been observed from Earth. To study its origin and composition, Jakub was sent to Jupiter. In just a few days, he will be able to take samples, which may help unravel the mysteries of the universe. The captain is asked questions, and suddenly a girl sympathizes with him, as he is the loneliest person in the universe. But Jakub assures her that it is not so. Yes, he is 500 million kilometers away from Earth, but nearly half the distance has been covered and he will soon return home. Moreover, his beloved wife Lenka constantly supports him, with whom he is in direct contact through the latest quantum communication system, which is faster than the speed of light. So Jakub does not suffer from loneliness. TV takes a commercial break where a cheerful Jakub praises the products of a generous sponsor. But the astronaut immediately frowns, and it becomes clear that he is a tired man who has not slept for a long time. Meanwhile, on Earth, Lenka records a message to her husband, apologizing for leaving him because she is not needed by him. But the flight curator stops the file from being sent and passes it to Tuma. On the ship, Jakub repairs the toilet again, grumbling at Peter. But the latter is more concerned about the malfunctioning cameras. He also notices the astronaut's tired look and advises him to get some sleep. Jakub asks to contact Lenka because she somehow does not respond to his calls, and he promises to find out the reason. The man begins training when Tuma reviews his wife's message. The woman sincerely worries for the family and does not intend to pass this message to Jakub. Lenka is packing her things at this time and does not respond to her husband's messages. Distressed, Jakub drowns his sorrows in sweets and tries to sleep, watching the approaching Chopra's Cloud. At night, noises from the malfunctioning toilet keep him from sleeping. He gets up unrested and even more tired, and looking at himself in the mirror, suddenly notices strange movement under his skin and tentacles protrude from his mouth. Jakub is horrified, trying to pull something out of himself, and wakes up. He starts the day on the treadmill, then prepares to equip the apparatus for sample collection. Half of the ship's cameras are out of order, and no one understands why. The thought of Lenka, who still does not make contact, disturbs him. And one day Jakub suddenly hears an unfamiliar voice offering help, but Peter hears nothing of the sort. True, there is a chance that Jakub intercepted the transmission of the Korean mission, which started after the Czech one, but the language was not Korean at all. Later, the friend informs that Lenka went to her mother's, so she will contact her husband when she returns. Jakub calms down a bit and continues his work. He inspects the compartments and suddenly sees a huge hairy spider in one of them. He closes the doors to the compartment and contacts Peter. But precisely in this part of the station, the camera has long been broken and he can see nothing. Jakub opens the doors, but the spider has not gone anywhere. Moreover, it starts a conversation, stating that it did not intend to scare the human. Then the astronaut locks himself in the airlock and informs Peter that he wants to decontaminate the ship. He gets into a spacesuit, says the password that triggers the system, and the surrounding space is filled with disinfecting foam, the color of which reminds him of a summer morning in the field where he and Lenka walked. But then the cleaning is over and Jakub emerges from the airlock. However, the spider hasn't gone anywhere. It informs him that the strange bath arranged for it by the human did not harm it and suggests removing the spacesuit. It is not dangerous. Jakub reaches out to it, but the spider dodges. Such is not the custom in its tribe, so it's better for the human not to do this. It is an explorer too who accidentally found Earth. It studied life on the planet for 3,158 years and even learned Earth's languages, but never understood the essence of the human soul. And when it met Jakub, it felt his loneliness and came here. Unable to accept what was happening, the astronaut hides in the sleeping compartment, but he immediately starts to vividly see and hear his wife. Jakob moves to the station's room, where Lenka appears before him again. It turns out the spider is broadcasting the human's memories because it is very interested in these strange feelings. And it wants to help him overcome emotional difficulties since his companion is leaving. Jakob tries to refuse the help, but the spider does not believe him. Meanwhile, on Earth, Lenka arrives at her mother's because she is pregnant and cannot be alone. Nearby is a boarding house where pregnant women live together, and she decides to stay there for a while. The mother does not understand her, as one cannot leave her husband right now. At the station, the spider asks the astronaut to give it some of his food, and he treats it to nut paste, the taste of which reminds it of its lost home. Its planet was destroyed by an enemy attack, and it fled and wandered through space for a long time. At this time on Earth, Tuma goes to Lenka. The woman is convinced that the wife cannot leave her husband right now. After all, she knew he was a very peculiar person. These qualities help him stay alone for many days, but Lenka is pregnant and suffers from loneliness. The spider tells the astronaut that Chopra's cloud consists of particles that contain wisdom. It cannot say how old it is, but everything has a beginning and an end, even the universe. The spider shows Jakob his first date with Lenka when she suggested they always follow each other, and he agreed. And he does not understand why make promises that you cannot keep, but Jakob has no answer. Later, he asks the spider to save some nut paste, and it reluctantly gives back the can. At this time on Earth, Lenka confesses to her mother that, although it is hard to raise a child alone, she is ready for it. And she will tell her daughter that she loved her father very much at first, but was mistaken. At the station, Jakob suddenly wonders about the spider's name and suggests naming the creature Hanus. His father told him about a master who lived in ancient times, who created astronomical clocks, for which the king ordered him to be blinded. The spider agrees to accept this name. Later, the astronaut plays music from the opera Mermaid and explains what it is. The spider immediately demonstrates his date with his wife when she appeared before him in a Naiad costume, but the man does not want to remember this. At night, Jakob again has nightmares, this time related to his father, who was a communist and died because of his beliefs. But the spider comforts its friend. There is no need to worry about the past, as the universe is as it should be. Later, Hanus watches in surprise as Jakob exercises, and Jakob explains that humans must do this in space, otherwise their limbs could fail. Hanus doesn't understand why leave the home planet then. At this time, Tuma visits Lenka. The woman tries to reach out to the wife's feelings, but she does not want to return to the past. Then the head says she will not pass her message, and the whole point of the silence surrounding their talks is that inside they are together. Meanwhile, there are only 45 hours left to reach the cloud. And then Lenka's voice spreads through the station. Jakob rushes to the transmitter and sees his wife's face on the screen. They talk about the past and the future when he sees a glowing particle in front of him, which Hanus calls the beginning. Jakob tries to catch it in a jar, but the particle freely passes through all surfaces. Suddenly, the ship loses all communication, and then Chopra's particles start swirling everywhere. Hanus calms the human. The beginning will not harm him, so there is no need to fear. It is a regular repository that cannot be described in human language. And then it asks why the arrival of a child so upsets Lenka. Because her feelings smell of fear. Jakob explains that they lost their first child, and he was not there then, nor now. For what? The spider shows Jakob their conversation when he promised to be there, but he lied to his wife, and she stopped believing him. Later, Jakob finally gets through to Peter on the quantum phone, but Hanus again turns on the man's memories, where he and his wife discuss his journey. He was so confident that he didn't even try to understand his wife. The spider realized that Jakob is selfish, and he is to blame for his loneliness. So it lost interest in him and wants to leave. This causes a panic attack in the astronaut, who no longer wants to be alone. Jakob tries to grab the spider, but it itself presses the man's body to the bulkhead and reminds him that it preferred to communicate without touching. The spider lets the human go and flies to the other end of the station. Jakob desperately follows it, promising to change, and again sees Lenka in the guise of a naiad. He floats in zero gravity, remembering his wife and crying from the sense of realizing the loss. Then he calls Peter and asks him to visit the woman. The friend goes to the boarding house and hands her the quantum phone. Jakob talks about how he loves her and asks for forgiveness for his selfishness. Now he doesn't understand why he neglected the most precious. He wasted his life on nonsense and is not worthy of her. Immediately after the conversation, he hears Hanus's voice again, asking him to rest because he has atoned for his guilt. Jakob asks not to leave him, and the spider admits that it too fears loneliness. But suddenly the man notices that the spider is not feeling well, and it admits that although it escaped from the enemy, it was already too late. They had taken over his body, and suddenly it hugs the astronaut. For the first time in a long time, Jakob falls asleep deeply, and the spider has to wake him up because a great discovery awaits him. It even brings him a tube of hot coffee to bed, after which the astronaut makes the final preparations. He contacts the Czech Space Authority and reports that his mission is dedicated to all the people of Earth, but especially to Lenka. Afterward, he reduces speed and begins collecting samples using special equipment. But then the spider becomes very ill. Jakob abandons his task and tries to help his friend. The equipment gives an error, and Earth commands to cancel the sample collection. But Jakob hears nothing because he sees Hanus in open space. The ship's systems fail one after another, and the control center orders to end the mission and return. But Jakob puts on a spacesuit, takes a bomb, and goes outside. Peter can't understand what's happening and pleads with his friend to return to the ship. However, using the explosion to catch up with the spider, Jakob holds it. Hanus thanks him, but it's all in vain. Soon the enemies will consume him, and Jakob, looking at the surrounding space, remembers the day he almost drowned. Then his father saved him, and now he forgives all his father's sins, and forgives himself. Hanus pulls him to the center of the cloud, where everything is gathered, the beginning and the end, the fluctuation of all times, his past and future, him, his Lenka, and his father. Every promise and punishment, everything is unchangeable and impermanent, but such is the truth of nature. The universe is as it should be. Before the man, Lenka appears again, and Jakob admits that their meeting is a miracle. Just like the meeting with the spider. Jakob hands his friend a can of nut paste he saved for him. The latter thanks him and asks to listen to the silence, after which it disintegrates into millions of particles, consumed by worm-like creatures that destroyed his race. And Lenka on Earth suddenly sees a glowing purple particle in the grass. Night turns into day. Jakob in a spacesuit wades through a transparent stream, above which, on a log, sits Lenka in a mermaid costume asking him to kiss her. Her face becomes the last thing he sees, at least for a moment, because at that time, he sees the lights of a South Korean ship which saves Jakob. Later he calls his wife Lenka, apologizes, and confesses that if he had known everything earlier, he would never have left, and she would kiss him once more. A fantastic, yet lifelike film. A work-absorbed astronaut had to be millions of kilometers away from his wife and hear a sermon from an extraterrestrial being to understand that family is the most important thing in his life, and one can only hope that he will manage to regain his sense of purpose. The movie begins by introducing us to the young protagonist, Vesper, who lives in a dystopian world sharply divided between the privileged elites and the struggling masses. The elite reside in secure, enclosed cities known as citadels, while the rest of humanity faces the challenges of survival in harsh conditions. In this world, the key to sustenance is unique seeds provided by the citadels. These seeds are genetically coded to yield just a single harvest, ensuring a constant dependency on the citadels for more. Vesper, amidst her struggle for survival in this harsh environment, shares her existence with her paralyzed father, Darius, a former army serviceman. Ingeniously, Darius's consciousness has been transferred into a drone, enabling him to accompany and communicate with his daughter as she navigates their dangerous world. Vesper is not only resourceful and brave, venturing out daily to forage, but she also possesses a keen understanding of biology and biohacking, intriguing. However, their lives take a dramatic turn when Vesper returns home one afternoon to discover they've been robbed. The generator powering their home, including the critical machine sustaining Darius, has been sabotaged. Faced with no other choice to save her father, Vesper sets out to seek help from a neighboring farm. Upon arrival at the farm, Vesper encounters a troubling scene. The farm faces its own challenges with a Jug, a genetically engineered human designed for labor, but devoid of intelligence. The Jug has been injured, rendering it useless, and Jonas, the farm's leader and Darius's brother, instructs a young boy to kill it. After witnessing this unsettling event, Vesper approaches Jonas with a request for bacteria to restore their generator. In exchange, she offers a blood donation, a valuable commodity used by Jonas to trade for seeds from the Citadels. Jonas expresses a desire for her to join their community, offering to care for her father as well. Vesper, however, is deeply unsettled by Jonas's intentions. She suspects that Jonas wants to use her as a breeder, a role she strongly rejects. After completing her blood donation, Vesper faces a dire situation when Jonas refuses to immediately provide the bacteria she needs in exchange. He explains that he must first sell the blood, a process that will take several days, time her father Darius does not have. In desperation and anger, Vesper attempts to reclaim her blood, only to be caught and forcefully expelled from the farm by Jonas. Undeterred, Vesper returns to the farm, exploiting a secret entry point known only to her. Vesper stealthily enters Jonas's lab and retrieves the bacteria she is owed. While there, she also manages to take some seeds acquired from the Citadel. As Vesper heads home, she promptly repairs the generator and begins experimenting with the stolen seeds, hoping to unlock their fertility. In the forest, Vesper stumbles upon Camellia, a woman from the Citadel, lying unconscious yet alive, with plants feeding off of her. Vesper acts quickly, clearing the plants and bringing Camellia back to their home, where she treats her wounds. Camellia then reveals that she was in the crashed glider Vesper had seen and is now desperately searching for her father, who is with her. Although not fully recovered, Camellia promises a reward for their help. Vesper agrees to assist in the search, despite Darius's objections. The following morning, Vesper sets out on her mission and soon locates the crashed glider, finding Camellia's father Elias inside. However, she's not alone in this discovery. Jonas and a group of survivalists also converge on the crash site. Jonas, cold and indifferent to Elias's pleas, decides to end his life simply because he is from the Citadel. When Vesper attempts to intervene, Jonas dismissively shoves her aside. He also uncovers a woman's scarf in the glider, deducing that another passenger, Camellia, needs to be found. Back home, Darius suggests informing the Citadel of the situation before Camellia takes any drastic action or Jonas finds her. However, the only way to communicate with the Citadel is through a transceiver located at Jonas's house. Vesper reluctantly agrees to the plan, lying to Camellia that her search was fruitless, but promising to continue the next day. After a while, Camellia earns Vesper's trust. Vesper then decides to reveal her secret greenhouse. This greenhouse is a testament to Vesper's ingenuity, housing a variety of bioengineered plants, each with unique abilities and characteristics. Vesper takes pride in her creations, but still hopes to develop a plant capable of producing edible seeds. While Vesper tends to her plants, Darius quietly confides in Camellia. He admits he knows they can never gain access to a Citadel, but implores her to be kind, as Vesper's dream of reaching the Citadel means everything to her. Later, Vesper questions why they are excluded from the Citadel, to which Camellia explains the leadership's fear of resource scarcity. Vesper suggests they could take on the worst jobs, but Camellia points out the Citadel's preference for control. Unlike humans, the genetically engineered laborers, or Jugs, don't resist. That evening, they share a musical moment, with Vesper singing while Camellia plays her mother's old instrument. The next day, Vesper once again sneaks into Jonas's house to use the transceiver. This time, however, Jonas spots Darius's drone and seizes it. While pretending to repair the drone, Jonas confronts Vesper about the missing seeds and the unidentified passenger, expressing his hatred for liars, especially within his own family. Vesper, refusing to admit anything, snatches the drone and flees, only to find it can't fly and crashes. In her attempt to recover the drone, Vesper stumbles upon a grim sight: the body of Jonas's assistant, who helped here before, left to die under a tree. Before she can process whether he was killed for aiding her, Jonas's followers apprehend her. They forcefully mark her hand with a seal, symbolizing her as Jonas's property. Distraught and overwhelmed, Vesper returns home, where Camelia immediately offers comfort. Guilt-ridden by her own deceit, Vesper breaks down and confesses to Camelia that Elias is dead. In a moment of stark revelation, Vesper decides to show Camelia the truth by taking her to see her father Elias's body, now tragically floating in the river. The sight overwhelms Camelia, leading to an intense emotional breakdown. She clings desperately to her father in grief, forcing Vesper to intervene and pull her from the river. During this intense moment, Vesper notices an unusual scar on Camelia's back that reacts peculiarly to her touch. This discovery leads to a shocking truth. Camelia is not a human, but a highly advanced Jug, a creation of Elias who was expelled from the Citadel for creating an intelligent slave. Camelia confesses her deception. She had been on the run and never had the capability to get Vesper and Darius into the Citadel. Angered by this betrayal, Vesper confronts Camelia physically before they return home. Once there, Vesper coldly tells Camelia to leave after she cleans up. Meanwhile, Vesper repairs the drone and shares the day's events with Darius. Darius, understanding the complex situation, urges Vesper to be more compassionate towards Camelia, explaining that Jugs are bound to their programming and have no real choice in their actions. At the same time, Camelia, grappling with her lost purpose and fearing capture by the Citadel, contemplates ending her life. However, Vesper, influenced by her father's words, intervenes just in time. Realizing Camelia's potential contribution to her research, Vesper proposes to use a sample of Camelia's cells. The process proves challenging, as Camelia's cells are secured just like the Citadel's seeds. In an attempt to ease Vesper's frustration, Camelia plays music. Miraculously, the music unlocks Camelia's cells, allowing Vesper to modify the Citadel seeds successfully, creating a sustainable food source. And all it took was a little Nickelback. Needing more supplies for further research, Vesper briefly leaves for the old lab with the drone. During her absence, Camelia stays to watch over Darius, which leads to a dangerous encounter when Jonas arrives. Initially, Camelia tries to feign innocence, but Jonas sees through her act and threatens Darius's life. Camelia agrees to go with Jonas without resistance. However, Jonas soon discovers the mark on her back, identifying her as a Jug, and attempts to reprogram her to obey him. Vesper returns just in time, and a fierce struggle ensues, with Vesper, the drone, and Camelia fighting against Jonas. They manage to overpower him, but Vesper refuses to kill him. Instead, she strikes a deal. She will share the secret of the fertile seeds with Jonas if he agrees not to alert the Citadel. Despite Jonas's apparent agreement, he betrays them by contacting the Citadel and revealing Camelia's location. As night falls and Vesper completes her work on the seeds, their moment of triumph is cut short. Darius's drone detects an external threat, signaling the Citadel's approach. A weird organism invades their home, releasing a toxic substance. Darius, with his military background, quickly recognizes the danger and instructs Vesper and Camelia not to breathe until the threat subsides. Camelia, feeling responsible for the imminent danger, offers to surrender herself to protect Vesper and Darius. However, Darius refuses to let her sacrifice herself, knowing the Citadel will pursue Vesper regardless. Instead, he devises a plan to distract the soldiers, giving Vesper and Camelia a chance to escape. Vesper is initially reluctant to leave her father behind in the face of the impending threat from the Citadel's soldiers. However, Darius persuades her to take cover nearby, assuring her that he will handle the situation. He plans to tell the soldiers that there is no Jug present, drawing on his experience as a former army man to communicate effectively with them. As the soldiers approach, their first stop is Jonas's farm, where they eliminate him and his group. Meanwhile, Vesper and Camelia take painstaking efforts to make Darius's home appear abandoned. They cover everything up and take the valuable, unlocked seeds with them as they hide in the forest. Unbeknownst to Vesper, her father's actual plan is to sacrifice himself by self-destructing the drone, hoping to take the soldiers down with him. From their hiding spot in the forest, Vesper witnesses the explosion and, driven by desperation, tries to rush back to aid her father. Camelia, recognizing the danger of this action, stops her, reminding her that it's too late to do anything for Darius. Their situation worsens when two soldiers, having survived the explosion, start pursuing them. Vesper leads Camelia through a swamp, aware that it is filled with dangerous plants that could potentially eliminate their pursuers. Their tactic proves effective as the first soldier falls victim to one of these lethal plants. The second soldier, however, learns from his comrade's fate and cautiously avoids the same trap. Vesper and Camelia, in an attempt to remain undetected, crawl on their knees and hide behind bushes. Unfortunately, another plant betrays their position with a noise, alerting the soldier to their location. Facing imminent danger, Vesper and Camelia decide to take the offensive. They attack the soldier, seize his weapon, and manage to force him into the deadly plant's trapping zone, resulting in his death. The distant sound of approaching gliders signals more danger. Realizing that the Citadel will never cease their pursuit as long as she is with Vesper, Camelia makes a difficult decision. She understands that Vesper and the precious seeds will always be in danger as long as she remains. Despite Vesper's protests, Camelia gently puts her to sleep and conceals her under fallen leaves before surrendering to the soldiers. The next morning, Vesper awakens to find her home reduced to ashes. She plants some of the unlocked seeds in the remnants of her old garden, a symbol of hope and renewal. In the aftermath, she encounters a group of children who survived the attack on Jonas's farm. Together, they decide to follow the mysterious people that wander around, seeking to uncover their destination. Their journey leads them to a towering structure constructed by these people. Driven by a sense of purpose, Vesper climbs to the top of the tower. There, she releases the seeds from her hand, allowing the wind to carry them to various corners of the land. This symbolic act represents her hope that the seeds will grow and multiply, providing sustenance for all. The movie concludes on this note, leaving a lasting impression of resilience and the enduring power of hope. The next day, Faraday records a message to his wife. He explains that on Earth they would be called a family, and their children would be real children and not dolls. It seems as though he's beginning to understand what emotions are. Drones on Antea have no right to choose, but on Earth the range of choices is astounding. There can be dozens of varieties of just coffee. Even children can choose. Humans create rituals out of simple actions. For example, the ritual of family dining or talking to God. And during meals, people share their day's events. They also experience a sense of joy which Faraday wishes to experience with his wife. Each generation here produces a handful of great minds. Justin is one of them. The number of emotions experienced by people in a day is absurd. And everyone around Faraday lives in fear of some kind. The fear of failure leads Clay to meet with Finch. After a tough conversation, he still pleads for another week, as Faraday was almost done building the device. Faraday then continues to explain that on Earth, everyone has their own self, but on Antea, they are born either as knowers or drones, but here everyone creates themselves. And people also believe in something higher, that is, in God. One day, Josiah suddenly cuts off a conversation about synthesis and leaves the table, and this marks the beginning of his changes. Then a man plays a jazz record explaining what it is and how it originated. While improvisation was inexplicable, Faraday tries to explain it to his wife. Meanwhile, Elizabeth tells Clay that the signal in the tornado came from somewhere in Southeast Asia. Also, the stewardess on the plane, Faraday, was posted about it afterwards. After seeing Clay off, Elizabeth calls someone on the phone and asks for a meeting. At this time, Eddie informs his brother about the desire of oil magnate Thorne to buy half of the Origin Corporation. In London, Josiah notices a music store. He then picks up a guitar and starts playing, astonishing the salesman, but suddenly the man faints. Justin finds him in the hospital, and although doctors were sure everything was fine, Faraday tells how Josiah was born in the Bahamas and turned his genius to music in his youth. But his wife left him after their daughter was born, and the alien confesses that she shared his DNA with the old man, which is now rewriting Josiah's human genome, and what he will turn into is unknown. Josiah then leaves the house and goes to a bridge. There he finds a wasp nest and stares at it for a long time, and upon returning home, starts writing an endless equation. The doctor arrives and announces that his blood oxygen level is elevated. Justin blames everything on Faraday, but suddenly, Faraday realizes that Josiah translated his daughter's equation into sound frequencies and wrote a song, the key to the synthesis process. He sets up a keyboard instrument in front of the device and asks Josiah to play its melody. Well, the man begins to play, and gradually, by changing frequencies and tempo, he manages to activate the device. Faraday joins him, and everything works out. That night, Elizabeth takes Josiah's medical chart from the doctor and reports of Clay about Faraday's successful experiment. Looking at the test results, she figures out that Newton is in Cambodia, where a cement bunker can be seen in the middle of the jungle. Clay informs Finch about this, and she forbids him to go there. But the agent sends a special force team to Cambodia. The soldiers enter the building, which turns out to be empty. But inside they find unknown plants whose dust kills them. Clay watches this in horror through a mirror screen. Meanwhile, Molly asks her family to help her with an assignment and create a family tree. But they have no photos, so Faraday draws a very similar family portrait to which Molly asks to add him. At this time, Hutch and Eddie attend the presentation of the new oncology center of the Magni, born because Eddie is obsessed with the idea of using it to protect against the CIA. Clay's people try to understand what happened in the bunker of Cambodia, and Elizabeth finds power lines laid out of the bunker, but can't yet track exactly where. Josiah notices that the fingerprints are disappearing from his fingers, and he hears synapses forming in his brain, and realizes that he's becoming an Anthean. At Eddie's estates, a meeting begins attended by Clay. Justin realizes that he is not a scientist at all and starts suspecting that something is not right. She doesn't want Faraday to fall into the hands of those who tore Newton apart. And later, Finch reprimands Clay for the soldiers' deaths and orders him to fly to Washington. Realizing that their work could be blocked by the CIA, Justin leaves, and Faraday activates the system, calling Newton to start asking questions. He doesn't understand why the launch was delayed, as it's fatal for Antea. Newton, impressed with his rebirth, advises learning to lie. To outsmart the CIA, he must make himself a legend, as Fame could not be killed. Newton disconnects, and Elizabeth, rushing into the laboratory, fails to see anything. Thinking it over, Faraday suggests making their work public, as the CIA loves silence. Hutch arranges a meeting with a journalist friend, and Faraday talks about a new energy source and the CIA's threat to freeze the project. Eddie learns that a man named Clay emerged from a witness protection program. Clay at the moment tries to explain himself to a committee and shows an order signed by Finch and talks about the tape of Newton's interrogation. The woman is shocked, as she did not expect much treachery from her protege. Clay gets a permission to continue the case. Elizabeth shows Justin camera footage from Cambodia, but Newton was not there, even though the bunker was sending a signal into space. Apparently, the alien was talking to his people and warns that Clay will never allow the machine to be taken unless they catch Newton. Justin tells Faraday about the soldiers' deaths, but he doesn't believe that Newton could have killed people. That night, Clay comes to Eddie and tells her that he and his mother came to America from Russia, but the woman turned out to be a terrorist. She blew up the building where she worked, abandoning her son to fate. That's when Finch found and adopted him, and he doesn't know where his real mom is now. And he destroyed his foster mother today, and meanwhile, Faraday also finds the Cambodian recordings and hears Newton's signal to Antea. He admits to Justin that Newton deceived everyone, and he never intended to return home because he wanted to bring the Antheans here. But he, Faraday, promises to do everything to save Earth. Newton transmits the signals intercepted by the CIA, but they cannot decrypt them. Justin is sure that the machine will still be taken, so she asks her friend to take Molly away. They then rush to the laboratory, and Elizabeth immediately reports this to Clay. Faraday dismantles the machine, gives the core to Justin, orders her and Josiah to leave, and stays in the laboratory. The pair barely manage to avoid Clay and his henchmen, and agents burst into the laboratory where they are met by Faraday. But after driving away, Justin decides to return for the alien, and in the laboratory, Faraday, seeing the agents, detonates a gas cylinder. Later, a stunned Clay sees Josiah carrying Faraday away, but is unable to stop it. Faraday regains consciousness and names Mary's phone number. Justin calls her and drives to the monastery. The sister immediately orders the preparation of the operating room and instructs to hide the device. It turns out that Faraday lost a lot of blood, but first the bullet must be removed. When Mary cuts the skin, strange tentacles jump out of the alien's body, frightening the sisters. But Mary assures them that he is an angel. Hutch receives an offer to sell his part of Origin for a large sum. Although he doesn't understand why Magnate Thorn would want a blown-up laboratory, he agrees. In the monastery, Mary sets up women on lookout posts, and Josiah announces that he's ready to give his blood to Faraday, convincing the sisters that he's a Nephilim, half angel, half human. Clay's people search Justin's house, and Elizabeth finds a clue but reports it to her mysterious contacts. At the time in the monastery, Mary confesses to Justin that she got Newton addicted to alcohol, thus ruining his life. Therefore, she asks Justin to do everything to save Faraday as she loves him, although she doesn't yet realize it. In the meantime, Clay's assistant traces a call from Justin and the agents and learns their location. Mary begins a blood transfusion operation from Josiah to Faraday. Clay's agents rush to the monastery, while Elizabeth warns someone that the alien has been found. Meanwhile, to buy time to complete the operation, the sisters and Mary arm themselves and fend off against the agents. A shootout begins, and Clay demands the surrender of the alien, but the sisters stand their ground. However, they run out of bullets, and Mary orders everyone to run while she kneels at the altar. There, Clay finds her, and the woman asks him to say his real name, and he admits that he is Ivan. But the nun corrects him, as his real name is Judas, and the agent shoots her. Hearing the shot, Justin goes into the room and encounters Clay. He orders Faraday, Justin, and the device to be taken, leaving the old man behind. Mary regains consciousness and crawls to the operating room with her last strength. She reaches Josiah's hand and dies happily. Justin's friend and Molly fall into the hands of unknown people. At the same time, Elizabeth warns Clay that they don't have the algorithm to activate the core, and he reports that he has interrogation experience. The alien and Justin are brought to a demolished laboratory and tied to chairs. Seeing Justin being beaten, Faraday confesses that the recorded signal from the tornado is an order for the remaining Antaeans to prepare for flight to Earth. Clay takes Justin to another room and orders Elizabeth to guard while he deals with Faraday. The agents start torturing and demanding to confess when and how the aliens will arrive. Elizabeth asks Justin for the algorithm, but Justin remembers how the girl betrayed her family. She allowed Clay to kill in the monastery, so how is she any better than him? Clay continues the torture, but it had no effect on the alien. And instead, Faraday manages to enrage Clay, claiming that it was Finch who used him and not the other way around. The agent orders water torture, but it turns out to be a gift for Faraday, as he loves the water. Then Elizabeth remembers about the X-ray, and it truly causes Faraday pain, and he starts screaming, which Justin hears. Suddenly, Watt appears before Faraday and advises him to make something up for Clay. Elizabeth notices this and realizes that the alien is losing his mind. Watt, meanwhile, suggests to Faraday that Clay had two families. The alien starts seeing that one family abandoned the boy, and the other he betrayed himself. This turns out to be the boy's eternal pain, and Clay gets angry and shoots Faraday in the leg. Visions of Antea, his family, and the flight flash before the alien, and he gives Clay a vision about the imminent arrival of a ship prepared by Newton. The synthesis machine is the ship's engine, but without Faraday it won't work, and the alien offers Clay to play Russian roulette. And this is because he can entrust synthesis only to someone who won't hesitate to sacrifice themselves for progress. Faraday tells Clay about his biological mother's dossier, which he found on the internet. He'll say where she is if Clay loads a bullet, spins the chamber, and pulls the trigger. The agent will have a chance to ask 5 questions, and if he survives, Faraday will give him the synthesis. The agent agrees to the terms, and they start the game of Russian roulette. Clay asks about the world of Antea. Faraday tells, and the agent pulls the trigger, and he survives. Finally, they get to the main question for Clay about his mother, and the alien confesses that everything with his biological mother was planned and executed by Finch. She was part of a team working on Newton, and she deliberately deprived the boy of his family and took away his name. Clay, driven mad, points the gun at Faraday, but Elizabeth, who enters, shoots first, killing the agent, and she contacts someone and reports that she has Faraday and Justin, and soon people from oil magnate Thorne arrive at the bunker. Molly has been with them for a long time and is safe, and Josiah is also alive, but his illness has returned. All of them are now under Thorne's protection as he sees the future in synthesis. The people are taken to meet the magnate, and in a vine-covered cave where Buddhist monks sit on the floor, they meet Newton. Faraday recalls how on Antea the knowers took seeds from him that was supposed to sprout on Earth. In the present, Faraday expresses outrage over his dissection, but Newton draws attention to the surrounding vegetation. He had given the monks Antea seeds in exchange for shelter and permission to observe their prayers. This area is a complete magnetic anomaly, which is why satellites see nothing and the CIA cannot find him. Therefore, no one could spot the huge spaceship that Newton built. He shows the ship to Faraday, who realizes that only the knowers should come to Earth. Faraday's shocked because it was the knowers who made all the decisions that led to Antea's demise, and the drones just followed their orders. But now it's the knowers who must perish. Justin also realizes that after the arrival of the knowers, humans will become drones, and after all, the reborn Josiah stopped experiencing emotions and began to prioritize efficiency over love. Newton insists that only the merging of races will give Earth a chance to survive, but Justin is adamantly against it. She refuses to unlock the device algorithm, which she altered before fleeing the laboratory. She leaves, and Newton forces his student to learn the algorithm, as he's destined to be the one who will greet the aliens on Earth and prevent their killing. This is because he will become a legend after becoming the head of the Origin Corporation. Faraday demands to take his family on the ship, but Newton advises forgetting about them and staying Justin. He doesn't want to see drones on Earth. Faraday was wrongly classified as a servant because he always asks questions. Faraday finds Justin, who's disappointed in him, and demands to be taken home, but he couldn't do that until he learns the algorithm. He confesses that it was she and her family who taught him to love. Justin gives in and goes home, and they again live in their old house. Josiah's illness has returned, and the woman is disappointed, but her father reminds her of faith, which will help them endure everything. 3 months later, Elizabeth visits Justin, and the woman confesses that she betrayed them for money. But now the CIA will take revenge on her and sooner or later kill her. But before that, they will take Faraday, and Elizabeth gives her cross to Justin and asks her for forgiveness, and Justin reveals to her Thorne's identity. Later, she accidentally finds Faraday's device, which alerts her to an approaching tornado. Justin follows its directions and enters the hurricane's eye. Meanwhile, news reports broadcast a man ready to share a new type of energy with the world. In the evening, in a huge theater, Faraday appears on stage and he begins to talk about everything that happened. Simultaneously, agents head to Justin and Hutch's home. At the theater, a sniper targets Faraday, but he pulls out the synthesis box, forcing the sniper to stop. Faraday is brought to Finch and he refuses to answer until he sees Justin and Hutch. Although Finch is sure that she is one, the couple is brought in. Then Faraday reminds them that the controlling stake in the new enterprise now belongs to Justin and Hutch, and without their consent, no one can do anything with the device. Faraday will fly to Antea and bring back the remaining people of his planet to Earth. Finch threatens all three with imprisonment, and in response, Faraday announces that in 12 hours, the blueprints for quantum synthesis will appear on the internet, and people will get it for free, and the USA will no longer be the world's owner. Finch threatens Justin's family, but Justin reminds her that against the system is the entire population of Earth, and now the CIA will have to worry about their safety. Later, Faraday comes to Newton, who admits that he's proud of him. Later, Faraday visits Josiah to return his hat and thank him for showing him his paternal love. He says goodbye to Molly, teaching her Antean gestures, and she gives him a logo figurine. The hardest moment for him arrives saying goodbye to Justin, and he will bring his family there, although they might not recognize him now. But the woman is sure that everything will be as it should be. Faraday prepares for departure, while Molly and Justin planned Anthea's siege near their house. And at night, they watch the launch from a distant star. At times very naive, at times deep and subtle, with philosophy, with reflections on family values, but overall, lovers of science fiction should really enjoy it.